Hello there and welcome. I'm Harriet from Millennium Library. We have Master Gardener Fran Wershler with us to discuss the various tools that would be important to use when performing everyday tasks in the garden. Fran is a longtime gardener, as well as a former editor of 13 years and ongoing contributor to the Prairie Garden. She has been a judge of horticulture, food, and clothing at summer fairs, and has been involved and continues to be involved with various horticulture groups and activities. Before we begin, I'd like to mention we have a number of online services that have gardening resources and information for the beginner to the expert gardener. This includes our RB Digital and Overdrive services for ebooks and e-audiobooks, and gardening e-magazines such as Gardening the Easy Way, Home Gardening, and Gardening for Shade. Browse and download ebooks and e-magazines using your Winnipeg Public Library card at winnipeg.ca/library. We also have a gardening info guide that contains links, book suggestions, and more, a variety of different types of information and resources. Click on info guides on our website to find this and our other helpful guides.
Hello, I'm Fran Wershler. I garden in Winnipeg, St. James actually, and I've been gardening for a very long time, probably since I was a child in elementary school, and a teacher said to us, why don't you go home and fill a tin can with soil and plant something in it and bring it to school? So that's what we did, and that's probably the beginning. But now that I've gardened for 40 years probably, I am looking at the tools that I've used over the years and thinking that there are tools that a buddy should use. There's a trite little saying about gardening is a matter of your enthusiasm holding up until your back gets used to it. And that's all very well. You see those little expressions on garden signs here and there. But there are reasons to use decent tools, and like any other kind of occupation that you might have, whether it's your kitchen where you could open a drawer and find a knife for every one of the jobs that you start to do, or whether it's the garage and there are tools in there to do all kinds of things with the car, the lawn, the gardens, whatever. So let's look at some of the tools that we might use for the kinds of things we're doing. Now, if you're going to grow some wonderful flowers or some big vegetables, you're going to be going through a lot of body motion. And those are the kinds of things that you need to care about if you're going to produce this great daylily or any other garden thing. And you have to think about the fact that your body moves and that it's good for it. And in the summer, most gardeners say that they lose weight. So perhaps you're reaching. You might be reaching down to find the leaves and the weeds that are under a plant. You might be on your knees and you're reaching up to move the dead heads on the flowers or to straighten a stem. You might be bending if this little species tulip is not too low, but it's small, so you want to rake away all of the tools that are in the near the plant, and there will be very many leaves and rubble and kinds of things around little tulips that come so early in the year. You might be standing. There's a lot of standing involved in working in a garden, whether you have tall flowers like the daylily or you have standard roses. And these things you may have to deadhead, you may have to straighten, you may have to pull away dead leaves on the rows. You may have to reach across the flowers that are growing in front of other plants to get to the tall ones. But in any case, you're standing, reaching, bending. And then you may be kneeling. Now, in your early gardening career, kneeling isn't a problem at all. You're up and down all the time. But if you want to get down to the little prairie crocuses or the aconites that grow early in the spring, they hug the ground and they're coming up through the things that are lying there. You may have to pull away some of those things with a rake, or you may just want to get down close enough to see their little faces. So in order to do that, you may have to have a variety of kinds of tools. Here's another little tulip that's a species tulip that you really love to see early in the spring. And you might have your tools all in some kind of a container so you can carry them to those flowers, and that you can be there ready to garden wherever you happen to go. So we'll talk about some of the different tools that do some of the different things. Perhaps the spades and the things for digging are the kinds of things that you will be thinking about. Whether the tools are $3.98 as the little shovel here would be, or whether it's an expensive tool like the one on the right, which comes from a bigger store, and you'll notice how the handle is hardwood and there's metal that goes up the handle and it fastens it to the spade part. The spade is long and thin so that you could dig a narrow hole to plant one bulb or to dig up one dandelion. And then on the extreme left, you'll find the hori knife. This is a Japanese kind of gardening tool, and it's worth its weight in gold. It's very heavy, and it will dig through roots, and it will dig up dandelions, and it will act as a spade, or it'll act as a digger, either one. The tall one is a Valentine that I received a number of years ago, and it has a long handle with a T-bar on the top. Now, I used it for reaching things if I was sitting on the ground or on a little gardening bench, but I find that now this is a very handy tool, so that if I have it in my hand or in the truck beside me, I can pick it up, hold the spade on the ground, and use the handle to help me get off the ground. After you've gardened a number of years, it's harder and harder to get yourself up. Then there are the other kinds of digging tools. The ones on the left are the ones that you use to weed the cracks between the patio blocks, such as the ones in the photo. And then there's the root knife in the middle with the curved blade and the serrated edge, and a dandelion digger, and two of the kinds of forks, a narrow one and a little wider one for digging between perennials and flowers that you've planted. And on the very right side, there's the loop hoe, and you can get those with a long handle so you can stand, or you can get this little hand one. A couple of things you can use those tools for. This is a Millennium Onion. This was a perennial of the year a couple of years ago, and it has a lovely pink bloom that lasts for several weeks, but it grows very rapidly. This plant is about a foot across, and you could take your shovels or spades and dig that whole plant up, and take the root knife that's over there on the left and just pretend you're cutting a loaf of bread and slice right through it so that you get maybe 5 or 6 pieces. Then you plant each of those pieces and you soon have another little clump that's that size. This kind of thing is very useful if you want to have a drift of flowers all the same. And then we have the cutting tools. The small ones first are a good example. The two on the left are well-known ones. There's the Fiskars brand and the Felco brand. Both of those are sturdy, and this is one of the few places where you probably should spend a little extra money. The Felco brand has clippers or secateurs, as they're sometimes called, um, to fit small hands, large hands. This one has a rotating handle so that when your fingers grip the one side, it rotates so that it fits your hand. And it's a very good pruner. The one above doesn't have that particular feature, but it's also an excellent pruner. Over on the right, you see the little pair of Japanese scissors. There's another $4.95 thing, and useful for deadheading, for cutting stems, and for the small jobs. The bigger jobs, like the two little saws in the middle, that are easy to do for different kinds of things. The folding saw and the other one will saw through branches on shrubs. Even the root knife at the bottom will cut through small branches. On the outside are the loppers. On the left is a plain ordinary one. They lengthen your reach and they will cut larger branches, say an inch, as compared to the smaller secateurs that are shown on the bottom. On the right is the more classic kind of a lopper, and it has a ratcheting motion, which will allow you to use your own strength plus extra strength supplied by that ratcheting motion. So that's a good thing too. And then we have the small tools. Some of them I've talked about before, but here's the little hand rake that's wonderful for getting in between the plants, perennials or shrubs. It doesn't matter. If you're down on your knees cutting things off, you need to rake them up. And there's the grass scissors in the middle, which have a short blade, but they're bended from the handle so that you can cut grass, say underneath a perennial where the mower had to go around. Then there are the larger tools that we need to use. In this picture, you'll see the large hostas. Some of those can be 3 or 4 feet across. Some of the smaller ones might be, say, 2 feet across. And the very, very little ones shown in the front, they're probably 8 to 10 inches across, perhaps. And so you need the different sizes of tools to dig the different kinds of roots. With your spades and forks, you'll be required to use those to dig these large plants. They might be a daylily, or they could be lilies, or if you're going to be working with a vegetable garden, you may have to dig potatoes. For that, you need the fork. Now, if you look at the handles on all of these long-handled tools, you'll see that the handle of the fork on the left has a long metal ferrule that runs up the piece of wood and is well fastened. And the fork itself has been finished with some kind of treatment so that it will not rust. It's a sturdy fork, but it has a shorter handle than some, and it's one that I use because I'm not particularly tall. This one has a Y-shaped handle, and that's good for helping you to push. The second spade in this collection is a general small spade used for filling your wheelbarrow, for if you're mixing compost and soil and peat moss in a wheelbarrow, you need a shovel to turn that mixture and fix it all together so that when you plant your new plants in it, you have a mixture that's friable, that holds the moisture, that also drains things and has the compost which contains all kinds of nutrients that you've saved. The shovel beside it has the longer spade portion itself, and this is called a transplant shovel, and it is useful for digging deeply to dig up your plants, especially those big ones. You may need to use more than one shovel when you start transplanting. This is spring, so this is the time when you really want to be having all your shovels and tools ready to go. And on the right is the first shovel I ever bought. This one was called a lady's shovel at the time. It's a spade, actually, and it has a hardwood handle. I believe it's ash on that particular one. The two middle handles the two middle forks come from Lee Valley, and they have either ash or oak handles with the T bar at the top, and they're stainless steel. The one on the right is not stainless steel, but it is usually, we paint it every year to keep it from rusting and deteriorating. And you have to keep your tools in good condition in order to make them work well. And you can sharpen the bottom of a small spade, such as the one on the right, but the others, you just keep them clean. Now, if you want to be digging among your garden, you'll notice here there are a variety of different things: forget-me-nots and this beautiful peony. Peonies come in so many sizes. This one being what I think is probably a cross between a fern peony and one of our lactifolia peonies. I do not know that for sure, but this one's called Smoothie, and it's a lovely one to have. And it's one of the things you might be aiming for if you are gardening for long periods of time. So again, these kinds of plants and these kinds of pleasures that you get from your garden are eased by the fact that you can use the tools that are useful. You also need some of the other tools that you're going to use every day. I never go into my garden without a pair of gloves. These gloves in the spring, I always wear goatskin gloves, and a little later I'll switch to the ones that are stretchy, that have some rubber or plasticky finish and a stretchy part on the back. The other thing you need is your sunscreen and your long sleeves and probably a hat. All of those will set you for the garden and get you ready to carry on for the enjoyment that it'll provide you. So now I'll conclude with this last lovely peony for you to look at, and perhaps we'll see you again sometime. Happy gardening.
Thank you, Fran. We can really see how important it is to have the appropriate tools to manage and maintain a garden. And for those of you who have tuned in, thank you for watching. Please follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.